I think we are recording, and I wanted to do an update with Prima for the Wexford Training Barn. And it's been probably about 2 months or close to 2 months since we did a video update with her. And you can see she's definitely put on more weight, but also I wanted to talk a little bit about the muscles. So Prima is now 31 years old. She had colic surgery at 28, and they removed 5 lipomas. None of them, luckily, pure luck, none of them were strangulating. So she did not have to have a resection at all, but they scraped 5 lipomas off of her abdominal wall. When she came home, she definitely felt better. She looked good, but she had these sort of ploppy cow patty type poops, and I was told by the vet that's probably her new normal, or it would clear up eventually. And probably about, I don't know, maybe 6 to 8 months after the colic surgery, well, let me put it this way. After her colic surgery, when I spoke with Stephanie, who I've interviewed on the podcast several times, Stephanie the nutritionist, she suggested this anti-inflammatory type diet, and there is some theory out there about lipomas and different benign type tumors as an inflammatory response of the body. It's not proven, there's no definitive research, it's just sort of a theory out there floating around. But wouldn't hurt anything. I put Prima on the anti-inflammatory diet recommended by Stephanie, and in fact I put my whole barn, all of the horses here, on that same diet. And out of all of the horses, Prima here looked like she dropped about, 150 pounds in a week or two. And I was horrified, so I put her back on her senior diet, and she looked pretty good. But like I said, she just had these kind of ploppy, no ball formation, cow patty kind of poops, or they finally got ball formation, but they were a little hard and dry. And within a few days of her having full ball formation in the poops and a little bit on the dry side, she had a second massive colic and wasn't going to send her back in for surgery. I kind of stayed up with her all night. We hit her up with IV fluids and heavy meds, and she was able to pull through that second colic. And after that second colic, I thought, I'm just going to try, knowing that she was going to look like she lost a lot of weight. I'm just going to try this anti-inflammatory diet, because I did notice the first time, even though she looked like she dropped a ton of weight, she didn't have that kind of ploppy cow patty poop. Her poop started to get a little bit of ball formation and not hard and dry. So I put her back on the anti-inflammatory diet. This mare never sees the bottom of a bucket. She's had all of her front incisor teeth removed, so she's not supposed to eat hay. She gets a little bit, but most of her food is soaked pellets or soaked hay cubes, and I keep everything pretty wet to kind of as a preventative for colics. So it was no lack of food. I gave her as much as she would eat, but on the anti-inflammatory diet, she again looked like she dropped 150 pounds in a very short amount of time. And I've had this discussion on a couple of podcasts with Stephanie and with Deb recently about that, what appears to be a sudden weight loss, because none of the other horses in my barn lost a single pound when I switched the diet from commercial feed to this kind of forage-based anti-inflammatory diet. Everybody else has done beautifully on it. She was the only one. And again, I gave it a week. And once again, her poops started to gain some ball formation, a little bit more firmness. She seemed to have a tiny bit more energy, and but she looked horrible. She looked like a rescue horse, and that's where I started taking video of her on this playlist, is when she still looked pretty bad. And we had already started a couple of months on the long reins, but she really still looked pretty emaciated. So it's taken many months. I work her as often as I can, some days an hour, some days just 20 minutes. But this is what we stick to as far as training, and she loves it. She comes and finds me if I don't work her, and she loves her little walking time on these small circles on the long reins. And you can see now, if you go back to Prima 1, her first video, you can really see how bad she looked. And I don't know that it all had to do with what we would consider a normal weight loss. And one of the first things I noticed when she started to put a little weight on was her belly got big, but her top line still looked like a disaster, and her ribs were still showing quite obviously. But I stuck to it, and the reason is because since she's been on this forage-based anti-inflammatory diet, knock on wood, almost a year, I have not had, I don't know, I have to look back. I don't know if it's been a year. It feels like a year, but I'd actually have to look back. I have no idea how long she's been on it. I just know I have not, knock on wood, had a single colic episode since then. So I go, if she looks terrible and I have to rebuild muscle and put weight back on her, that to me was far less of a problem than dealing with these severe colics where I really thought twice I was going to lose her. And I mean, I'm not a save a horse at all costs kind of person. She's 31 years old. She had her colic surgery when she was almost 29. She's 28. And if it had involved a resection, I had discussed with the surgeon to just not do that and to put her down on the table. She was very lucky that she didn't need a resection. None of the lipomas were strangulating. So they did the surgery. She bounced back pretty good. And even when she had her teeth pulled, she bounced back pretty good. So I knew that this sudden, what appeared to be a weight loss was not entirely a weight loss. And now, if you look at her earlier videos, Prima 1 and 2, what makes her look so skinny and so terrible is, I think, the truth about what had been going on under her particular inflammatory response. So not only do theoretically, possibly, can't say for sure, that the lipomas were an inflammatory response, but what appeared to be a beautiful top line, well-muscled, really, nice plump little pony, as soon as she was off of those inflammatory ingredients, the corn, soy, wheat, molasses, and canola oil, everything I thought was muscle was just maybe inflamed muscle. And one of the things, all these years I've had her, and she's been on senior for years, I never thought twice. I bought good feeds, I bought good supplements, she always looked great. The one training issue I've always had with her is she has no forward. And it was the bane of my existence because I love hot-blooded horses. And for my little Arab to have zero desire to move forward. And even now you can see she's still slow, but she's not stopping all the time, and I'm not having to push her to move. I'm just letting her pick her speed. And that's about 10 minutes this way. So while I'm chit-chatting, today's video I wanted to keep to about 20 minutes. So I'm just going to change direction. And what Prima's starting to show in her recovery is that horses that appear to drop weight when you go on this anti-inflammatory diet I think what we see underneath is maybe the truth of how the muscles are working, or what is actual healthy muscle development versus what appears to be a healthy top line that's just all riddled with inflammation. And the two things Prima hated the most was any kind of resistance on the reins. She couldn't take it. And I was always battling her to have more forward energy. And normally, when I work on horses' coordination, as soon as I stabilize the midline and the hindquarters, these horses that have no desire to go forward typically start to offer forward. It's not something I ever push a horse to do. It just happens once they get comfortable. So horses that are super slow and have no forward impulse, the reason is they're not comfortable in their forward motion. And I understand the mechanical skeletal coordination part of that, which I've worked on with Prima for years. But she always sort of stumped me, because even when we would make good changes, she never fully kind of came around to finding that comfort in forward motion. So she was always slow, halted as often as she could, and if I touched the reins, if I touched the bit with the reins, she was just having none of it. She would either rip the reins out of my hands, toss her head, or just shut down. So those training things that sort of didn't make any sense to me, because she looked good and I could get her balance pretty well, but it was always a bit of a struggle. Some things wouldn't stick, and the main thing that I'm used to getting that she never did was just offer more forward motion. And she had a hard time lengthening her neck and really lifting her back. So when I started these video series, I really wanted to share with you guys that if there isn't something like Lyme's disease, EPM, some kind of inflammatory response, maybe a metabolic issue, maybe something I haven't thought of, but when there's a health issue, the training that I do now, it seems the horses progress very slowly, or it's like pushing a rock up a hill just to get things to change. And now that she's on this anti-inflammatory diet, at least what I'm seeing is a normal rate of progress for her age, for her condition. I'm starting to see that everything that looked like a weight loss had more to do with chronic over contraction of the muscles through the top line. So she basically kept them short and tight because of the inflammation, and no amount of mechanical improvements to her coordination was sort of creating the suppleness that I'm used to finding as the skeletal coordination improves. Right? So you can see she's still sort of struggling with the forward. She's still working her way through it, but she now looks more muscled. She looks like she's put weight back on, but it's been a matter of releasing chronic tension and slowly building up the muscles through the hindquarter and back. She's at a point now where, if you look back at the earlier videos there, she's just showing an example, she was always shortening her neck, right? Which tells me the back and hindquarter don't feel stable to her. So as we've worked and worked, just repeating this exercise on the long reins, gradually she found enough stability through her back and barrel and enough engagement through the pelvis that more often than not now, she's finally lengthening the neck. And the fussiness you can see and the slowness is her still working through some very old habitual tightness, not only in her back and hindquarters, but in the thoracic sling, around the shoulders, and even through the neck. So it's still coming and going. This size circle is really helping her stay engaged. The long reins kind of keep the back and pelvis level. but this size circle is helping her kind of keep her hind legs up underneath her. And I finally have seen a change in her muscling, in the suppleness through her back, in the muscle building through the hindquarters and the back, and starting to really unload and free up the front legs and lengthen the neck. So that lengthening of the neck is always the dynamic response to gaining stability through the back and hindquarter. So I'm not making her lengthen her neck, and I didn't prevent her like there. I don't prevent her from shortening her neck. That's just the stability of the back and hindquarters sort of coming and going, right? That's also changing the weight distribution to the front legs. They're getting lighter each time we work. She can control her own body weight a little better and a little better. And the mobility through the front legs is starting to gently come back. So instead of seeing a lot of muscle definition around the shoulders and neck, it's all sort of softening and blending into each other. And that's what healthy, supple muscle use should look like on a horse. That we don't see muscle definition, we don't have high spots and low spots. The horse just sort of looks like one big smooth muscle from head to tail. She's still a little angular in her hindquarter, which means she has more muscle development to go. She still looks, her spine is still the highest point of her back, so she definitely has more muscle building to do through her back. But I'm no longer seeing the bands of muscle as clearly. I can still see them a little bit. I can still see the ribs a little bit. So she's still releasing quite a bit, and I mean years of chronically inflamed muscles that just created rubber bands through her body, tight little rubber bands. And I'm sharing my work with Prima. Prima is my horse. She's been with me since she was born. So this horse has been with me 31 years. And every single mistake I made in my sort of becoming a horse trainer, this mare has suffered through every learning curve. And I just adore her and love her. And she's been my greatest teacher because she's been always kind, always like I could use her as a lesson horse for many years. But she was always clear in her opinion. And when things didn't work for her, there was just no talking her into being obedient or compliant. She voiced her opinion very clearly and let you know what she thought about this training theory or that training theory. And so she really guided a lot of my work, because if it worked on Prima, it was going to work on a lot of horses. Oh, and we have a little rain shower coming through. So I have to shut this down and grab my equipment.